For a woman, perhaps the moment she dons a pristine white wedding gown, adorned with delicate white flowers in her hair, to walk down the aisle to her husband, is the most sacred. I was no exception. That morning, the Los Angeles sun poured golden light onto the jacaranda trees outside the gate. The air was unusually fresh. I sat before the mirror, watching the makeup artist meticulously touch up the blush on my cheeks, feeling both a flutter of excitement and a touch of melancholy. At over 30, with a stable career and enough maturity to understand my self-worth, I finally decided to build a home with Michael. He was a gentle, somewhat scholarly man who always brought me a sense of peace after stressful workdays at my company. We had been together for 2 years, a period not excessively long, but sufficient for me to believe I had found my life's final harbor. Michael was always caring, a good listener, and, most importantly, he respected my independence. My parents sat in the living room, occasionally glancing at the vanity where I was. Their eyes held both pride and the anxiety of those about to see their beloved daughter leave. My father, a man who had toiled his whole life at his custom woodworking shop, wore a sharp black suit today. His calloused hands trembled slightly as he held a cup of coffee to greet guests. He said that while our family wasn't rich, we had strong values. When you get married, Sophia, you must uphold our family's roots and live in a way that earns respect and affection, he advised. I smiled, taking his hand, silently vowing never to disappoint them. As for my husband's family, I knew Carol, Michael's mother, was a sharp, somewhat overbearing woman, but I always told myself that with sincerity and filial respect, even stone would wear down. The groom's party arrived punctually, confetti poppers bursting at the gate. Michael, in a dapper tuxedo, stepped in, his radiant smile like spring sunshine, making all my worries vanish. The private family blessing ceremony was solemn and heartfelt. Carol, today, wore an elegant plum velvet gown embroidered with subtle patterns and a large gold statement necklace. She smiled and chatted jovially, shaking hands with my relatives, which made me feel at ease. Throughout the ceremony, she continuously praised me as a talented, business-savvy, and virtuous daughter-in-law. At the time, I simply thought she was proud of me. Little did I know that behind that welcoming smile lay calculations that a straightforward person like me couldn't foresee. The wedding reception was held at a luxurious restaurant overlooking the Pacific Ocean, where the open space was breezy and filled with fresh flowers, exactly to my liking. I looked at the hundreds of guests, colleagues, friends, and business partners who came to wish us well, and my heart swelled with contentment. I had built my career, bought my car, accumulated assets, and now, a complete wedding with the man I loved. Everything seemed to be on a perfect trajectory until the reception was nearing its end. That feeling of completeness began to crack when the gentle orchestral music suddenly faded, giving way to an authoritative voice on stage. As the celebratory toasts began to flush faces, the atmosphere of the party reached its most boisterous. Michael and I were going table to table, expressing our gratitude, when I saw my mother-in-law, Carol, head straight for the center stage. She took the microphone from the MC with a very confident, almost showy demeanor. Michael gently touched my shoulder. He smiled and said, "Mom probably wants to give us some advice in front of everyone." I also smiled, standing demurely beside him, awaiting pearls of wisdom from my second mother. However, from her very first sentence, Carol caused the buzzing ballroom to fall silent. To all our esteemed guests, today is a joyous day for my son and my daughter-in-law, Sophia. I have another great joy I wish to announce to both sides of the family and all our friends, near and far. She paused for a beat, her eyes scanning the attentive guests, then her voice rose, brimming with pride. Our family has always had a tradition of supporting and loving one another. Therefore, after this wedding, so that our children don't have to work so hard, and to bring our family closer, my husband and I, along with our youngest daughter, Brittany, will be moving in with Michael and Sophia at the luxurious mansion in Bel Air that my daughter-in-law recently acquired. I felt a jolt of electricity run down my spine. My ears started ringing as if someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me in the dead of winter. I looked at Michael, hoping for some reaction, but he just stood motionless, his face revealing clear confusion mixed with embarrassment. Carol continued to ramble on about her son's filial piety and her daughter-in-law's talent. She painted a vivid picture of a multi-generational family living in a splendid mansion, with a garden, a swimming pool, and even staff. Guests began to murmur and whisper. Some praised the Chu family's great fortune. Others discreetly scrutinized me. The luxurious mansion in Bel Air she mentioned was indeed the multi-million-dollar property that everyone had been speculating was my dowry. In that instant, my self-respect surged more powerfully than ever. I had never promised to bring his entire family to live there. More importantly, that house had legal complexities I hadn't yet fully explained to Michael. Carol's unauthorized declaration, in front of hundreds of people, was not just an invasion of privacy. It was a moral trap, forcing me into a fait accompli. If I remained silent, it meant I accepted a complicated shared life with people whose personalities I barely understood. If I spoke up, I would become an insolent daughter-in-law, shaming my husband's family on our wedding day. Seeing the joyful expression of my sister-in-law, Brittany, sitting at a table, phone in hand, live streaming and boasting to her friends about the new house, I knew I couldn't back down. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from trembling, then gently stepped onto the stage, standing beside Carol. I saw her glance at me with a triumphant look. It seemed she believed that under the pressure of the crowd, someone who maintained decorum like me would have to bow down. But she was mistaken. I was Sophia, but that didn't mean I was easily manipulated. I looked directly into the microphone, a smile still on my lips, but my eyes had become incredibly firm. The vast ballroom now only heard the gentle breeze from the ocean, hundreds of eyes fixed on me. The bride stood at the line between obedience and truth. I gently nodded to Carol, then turned to the guests. My clear but firm voice resonated. First, I want to thank Mom for her kind words about me. Her concern for our future home is something I truly appreciate. However, perhaps in her overwhelming joy on Michael's special day, Mom made a small misunderstanding regarding the information about the house. This could lead to unnecessary misunderstandings for our family later on. I saw the smile on Carol's face falter, her eyes narrowing warily. Michael, standing below the stage, began to sweat profusely. He signaled for me to stop, but I ignored him. I continued, my voice calm, as if telling an everyday story. Dear Mom and all esteemed guests, the luxurious mansion in Bel Air that Mom just mentioned is, in fact, not property under my name. On the deed of that house, the owner's name is entirely different. I was merely assisting as a consultant and providing legal support in a separate business transaction. Therefore, the matter of our entire family moving in there is beyond my authority to decide. A loud gasp rippled through the ballroom. The murmuring turned into an uproar. Those who had just praised the Chu family's wealth now looked at Carol with sarcastic, mocking eyes. My mother-in-law's face changed from red to pale, then to a deep purple. She hadn't expected me to dare to air her dirty laundry so directly and politely. She stood frozen on stage, her hands clutching the microphone, trembling with shame and fury. Just then, from a table below, among my close friends, Chloe, my best friend, stood up and calmly walked onto the stage. Chloe was not only my best friend, she was also my longtime business partner. And more importantly, she was the true owner of that mansion on paper. Chloe took another microphone, smiling politely. Excuse me for interrupting the joyful atmosphere. I am Chloe, the owner of the house that Carol just mentioned. Sophia is a wonderful friend who helped me greatly in completing the purchase procedures. Perhaps in conversation, Carol misunderstood Sophia. Today is Sophia and Michael's happy day, and I hope we can focus on wishing the young couple well, rather than worrying about real estate matters. Chloe's affirmation was the final blow, leaving Carol with no way out. She muttered a few incoherent words, then shuffled off the stage, not daring to look anyone in the eye. Michael rushed to support his mother, looking at me with heavy reproach, but I merely returned his gaze with profound disappointment. The wedding ended awkwardly. Guests left with endless chatter about a mother-in-law who falsely claimed her daughter-in-law's house. I stood in the deserted hall, looking at the wilting flowers at my feet, my heart heavy with unspeakable sadness. I knew this was just the beginning of a battle I was forced to join to protect myself. Our wedding night had no candles, no flowers, no tender whispers. Instead, Michael sat slumped by the window, and my sighs echoed in the empty room. After Chloe's clear statement on stage, the wedding atmosphere seemed to thicken with an indescribable awkwardness. I saw Chloe walk towards me, gently squeezing my trembling hand as if to impart strength. Chloe was an independent and decisive woman. She understood perfectly the difficulties I was facing with my in-laws on my very first day as a daughter-in-law. Seeing Chloe stand tall and elegant before Carol's shock, I told myself how lucky I was to have such an understanding friend by my side. Carol, by now, had retreated deep into a corner of the stage. Her regal plum dress now seemed unable to hide the confusion and humiliation clearly visible on her heavily made-up face. She stared at Chloe as if searching for a loophole in her declaration, but everything was already too clear. Down in the reception hall, the whispers of my in-laws grew louder and louder. I faintly heard Michael's aunt sarcastically remarking that they thought they were marrying into a rich family with a mansion and cars, only to find it was all bark and no bite. These words pierced my heart like needles, not because I was ashamed of my own assets, but because I was heartbroken by the greed and superficiality of the people I was about to call family. Chloe still stood there. She smiled and greeted a few close guests, then turned to me, speaking loudly enough for Michael to hear. "Sophia, I'm still keeping that house vacant for you to finalize the design for our new office. When it's done, just let me know, okay? For today, just enjoy your special day and don't worry about trivial matters on the sidelines." Michael stood beside me, his face changing with every shift in emotion, from surprise to anger, and finally, a terrifying silence. He didn't say a word to Chloe, nor did he look at me even once. He just stared intently at his mother, then hurried to lead her off the stage. I watched his retreating back, a vague sense of unease rising in my heart. The man who always promised to protect me now chose to side with his mother's wrongdoings instead of defending the truth and his wife's dignity. Chloe looked at me with concern. She sighed softly and advised me to rest in the lounge for a bit to regain my composure. I walked sluggishly, my pristine white wedding dress sweeping across the cold tiled floor, mirroring the chill spreading through my heart. In the lounge behind the stage, it was dimly lit and eerily quiet. I sank onto a chair, burying my face in my hands, feeling utterly exhausted after a long day of playing the happy bride. I wondered if this decision to marry was too hasty. Had I only seen Michael's gentle exterior and failed to recognize the calculating family foundation behind him? The door opened with a dry creak. Michael walked in, his face as cold as stone. He didn't ask how I was, only uttered a loaded question. "Are you satisfied now, Sophia? You shamed my mother in front of so many people. Do you still consider me your husband?" His words were like a knife twisting in my heart. The truth needed to be clarified, yet he considered it an insult to his family. I looked at him, my eyes blurred with tears of indignation, but my voice remained firm. "I didn't shame anyone, Michael. Mom brought this humiliation upon herself by announcing things that weren't true. If our family moved there and then was exposed, it would be far more humiliating." Our argument in the waiting room hadn't even concluded when Carol and my sister-in-law, Brittany, stormed in like toxic winds. Carol no longer maintained the polite demeanor of a benevolent mother-in-law. As she stepped through the door, she hurled her expensive handbag onto the table with a harsh thud. Brittany stood beside her mother, her face flushed with anger, still clutching the phone she had intended to use for bragging moments before. The atmosphere in the small room suddenly became so suffocating I found it hard to breathe. Bullet-like glares from my in-laws focused entirely on me, as if I were a criminal who had committed an unforgivable felony. "You're so clever, Sophia. You've brought such shame upon this family. We don't know where to hide our faces." Carol hissed through gritted teeth, her face contorted with rage. "Do you know that all our relatives are laughing at this family for having a daughter-in-law who disrespects her mother-in-law? You stood there and let that Chloe girl humiliate me right on stage. You enjoyed it, didn't you?" I looked at my mother-in-law, filled with astonishment at her deceitful attitude. I tried to keep my voice calm, every word carrying weight. "Mom, I never disrespected you, but that house truly belongs to Chloe. I couldn't stay silent and let you declare a false truth like that in front of hundreds of people. If our family moved there later and was exposed, that would be far more humiliating." Brittany suddenly interjected, her young voice full of resentment and selfishness. Don't try to justify it. You're so wealthy, you helped Chloe register the house, so you definitely have a share in it. My mom only wanted our whole family to be close, but you brought up paperwork to humiliate my mom in front of a crowd. You value money more than family ties. Did you marry Michael just to make my family miserable? I looked at Brittany, the sister-in-law I once thought was innocent, who now clearly absorbed Carol's dependent and entitled mindset. I turned to Michael, hoping he would say something fair, but he just stood there, hands clenched, eyes fixed on the floor like a child caught in a mistake. His weakness was blatantly obvious. Seeing Michael's silence, Carol pressed on. She walked closer to me, pointing a finger directly at my face. Let me tell you, in this family, respect for elders comes first. You are a daughter-in-law, and no matter how successful you are out in society, here, you must obey me. You need to find a way to make Chloe transfer that mansion to you, or you must buy an equivalent luxurious house to save your husband's face. If you can't do that, this marriage won't last long. Carol's threat jolted me awake. I realized I wasn't just marrying a husband, but stepping into a den of unreasonable demands. I straightened up, wiped away the last tear on my cheek, and looked directly into Carol's eyes. I married Michael for love, not to be a tool for showing off or an ATM for the family. If you value a false reputation more than your children's happiness, then I apologize, but I cannot comply. After that fiery argument at the restaurant, my in-laws stomped off, leaving Michael and me in a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. We returned to the small apartment I had prepared for our private life. But the room, originally decorated with candles and roses, now looked lonely and ironic. I silently took off my heavy jewelry, feeling as if I was shedding each layer of the deceptive facade of a happy wedding day. Michael went into the bathroom without looking at me. The sound of the rushing water sounded like a scream from within him. I sat cross-legged on the bed, looking at my wedding dress hanging on the wooden rack, my mind swirling with thoughts of the future. The wedding night, which should have been a time for the couple to exchange vows of commitment, was now a terrifying silence, foreshadowing a major storm. About an hour later, Michael emerged, dressed in dark pajamas, his face still etched with sadness and reproach. He climbed onto the bed, but lay with his back to me. His breathing was heavy, as if suppressing something immense. I gently touched his shoulder, intending to say something to reconcile, so the night wouldn't end in such coldness. But he decisively pushed my hand away. Michael, we need to talk, I whispered, my voice breaking in the darkness. Michael sat up abruptly. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen in our 2 years together. What else is there to talk about, Sophia? You ruined my mother's happiest day. You made her cry all the way home. Do you know how much honor means to my mother? I heard him and felt a bitter taste in my throat. Your mother's honor is important. But what about the truth and my self-respect? I tried to explain. But you know it's Chloe's house, Michael. How could I let Mom lie like that? If I didn't correct it, later when everything came out, people would call our family scammers. Would you be able to bear that then? Michael wouldn't listen. He just repeated the refrain about filial duty. Mom is old. Even if she said something a little wrong, you should have just endured it. You're a daughter-in-law. You just needed to nod and smooth things over, and we could figure it out later. No one would die. Why did you have to make such a big deal out of it? You're too arrogant, Sophia. You think because you have money, because you're successful, you don't have to respect anyone, right? Michael's weakness had morphed into an attack on me. He lacked the courage to acknowledge his mother's mistake, so he chose to blame his wife to release his own helplessness. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, tears silently streaming down my pillow. Michael had fallen asleep with heavy sighs. As for me, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a vast abyss. This marriage had only begun a few hours ago, yet it already felt so exhausting and distant. I realized that the difference in mindset and the boundaries between me and my in-laws were a huge chasm. And if Michael wasn't willing to build a bridge with me, I alone would never be able to cross it. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the curtains, I knew I had to face a reality, far from the rosy dreams I once cherished. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a weary soul. The living room still carried a faint scent of the scented candles from last night, but the air had turned cold sometime during the night. Michael was up earlier than me, busying himself in the kitchen making coffee. The clinking of the spoon against the cold mug sounded particularly sorrowful. I walked down the stairs, trying to force a smile to begin the first day of our married life. But Michael didn't look at me. He just pushed a cup of coffee towards me and said in a dry voice that we had to go to his mother's house early. I knew this visit to my in-laws today wasn't simply a traditional post-wedding visit, but a confrontation, a test Carol had set to teach this stubborn daughter-in-law a lesson. My heart tightened, but I tried to appear calm because I didn't want to seem weak from these very first steps. On the way, Michael drove in silence. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that veins popped out. His silence was like a wall separating us, and I didn't know how to break it. When the car stopped in front of his family's old house in a suburb of LA, Michael suddenly turned to me. His voice this time wasn't as harsh as last night but carried a hint of pleading, a touch of remorse, yet it was full of pressure. Sophia, when we go inside, please take the initiative to apologize to Mom, okay? After all, she's our elder. Even if she made a mistake, it was because she loves us and wants us to have a good reputation with relatives. I'm really tired, caught between you two. Could you please put your ego aside for my sake? I looked into his eyes, seeing a weakness and spinelessness that was truly pathetic. He wasn't asking me to defend the truth. He only wanted me to play a role so he could have peace. Michael, I haven't done anything wrong to apologize for, I said, my voice gentle but firm. If I apologize, it means I admit I was wrong to correct the information about the house. And that will only make Carol believe she has the right to control our lives with lies. You love your mother, and that's right, but you also need to love your wife and what's right. Michael sighed a long, heavy breath. He didn't say another word, but angrily got out of the car, slamming the door shut as a final act of defiance. I took a deep breath, adjusted my dress, and followed him in, mentally preparing for a new battle. Inside the living room, Carol sat regally on a carved wooden chair, her face stern, devoid of emotion. Brittany stood behind her, massaging her mother's shoulders. Seeing me enter, she subtly curled her lip in a challenging smirk. Michael immediately rushed to his mother's side, asking about everything, as if to compensate for the pain she had endured last night. I greeted them appropriately, placing my gift basket on the table, but Carol didn't even glance at it. I thought Miss Sophia was so busy and accomplished that she wouldn't have time to come here and pay respects to her mother-in-law. Carol sneered, her voice sharp as a knife. You've ruined this family's reputation, and now you think you can bring a few fruit baskets to silence me? Her words were like chilling blasts of wind filling the room, instantly making my efforts at reconciliation feel pointless. Witnessing my mother-in-law's attitude, I knew that if I didn't establish boundaries now, my life as a daughter-in-law would be an endless cycle of oppression. I didn't sit down but stood upright, facing Carol's fiery gaze. Mom, I've come here today to fulfill my duties as your daughter-in-law and to frankly discuss our future life together, I began, my voice echoing slightly in the small room. I know you're angry because I clarified the matter of the house, but please understand me. I am a businesswoman. Trust and transparency regarding assets are vital to me. I cannot allow others to view our family as greedy individuals who claim friends' properties as their own. That would not only tarnish my reputation, but also affect Michael's career in the future. Carol slammed her hand hard on the wooden table, the sound making Michael jump. Don't you dare bring your business talk here to lecture me. You're a daughter-in-law in this family, so your money, your house, everything belongs to the Chu family. That Chloe girl is your friend. Tell her to sell the house to you at a low price, or you use your savings to buy another equally luxurious one, so my daughter Brittany and I can live there too, fitting our status. You're so rich. Are you really going to let your mother-in-law live in this dilapidated house while you enjoy a high-end mansion all by yourself? Where is your respect for elders? I saw Michael about to speak, perhaps to echo his mother, so I quickly cut him off with a stern look. I realized Carol's greed far exceeded what I had imagined. She didn't just want prestige, She wanted to seize all the sweat and tears I had poured into my work over the past 10 years. Mom, I need to make this clear. Once and for all, I emphasized each word. My assets are earned through my own hard work, and I have the right to decide how to use them. Michael and I already have our own apartment, and I want us to live independently to build our own home. I will continue to care for and support you and Dad, and look after the family as is my duty. But I will never accept pooling assets or allowing others to interfere with my private space. As for Chloe's mansion, that is her property. I have no right, nor do I have any intention, to force my friend to do anything unreasonable. I hope you will respect my decision, so that our family doesn't have to suffer from unnecessary conflicts. Brittany suddenly jumped in, her voice shrill. Sophia, how can you say that? You married my brother, so you have responsibilities to this whole family. Are you planning to live completely separate lives? Michael, look how much your wife disrespects Mom and me. Michael, at this point, seemed cornered. He looked at me with eyes full of both anger and helplessness. Sophia, you're being a bit extreme. Mom only wants what's best for us. Why do you have to be so rigid, like strangers? Looking at the husband I had chosen, my heart turned cold. My clear boundaries were seen as cruelty by them, while their greed was rationalized under the beautiful name of family love. I knew this battle had only just begun, and I had to maintain these boundaries if I didn't want them to swallow my entire life. The first meal I had as a daughter-in-law at my in-laws' house took place in a somber atmosphere, like the sky before a major storm. I had spent the entire afternoon in the small, hot kitchen, preparing Michael's favorite dishes of his mother. From the flavorful fish stew to the attractive braised pork belly, I made everything with meticulous care, hoping that my sincerity in cooking could ease the recent tensions. Yet, when the meal was served, a terrifying silence once again enveloped the four of us. Carol picked up her chopsticks, but only poked at a few vegetables. Her eyes remained fixed on an indefinite space, as if she were hatching another plan to subdue this daughter-in-law. Brittany, meanwhile, ate while scrolling on her phone, occasionally pouting and complaining that this dish was too salty, that one too bland, making my heart sink. Mid-meal, Carol suddenly put her bowl down, the sound of it hitting the wooden table dry and sharp. Then she began the familiar refrain I had anticipated. Sophia, no matter what you say, you are now part of the Chu family. And family members must share. There can be no my money versus your money. I have an idea. You're doing well in business. You have many connections. And our family also needs to upgrade its image to match our new status. My daughter, Brittany, and I are struggling with this old house right now. So, how about you see if you have any surplus funds and invest in Brittany so she can open a fashion boutique? And while you're at it, maybe Mom could move into your apartment for a while to teach you more about being a good wife and keeping the family spirit alive. I felt the mouthful of rice turn bitter as poison. Carol had not given up on invading my life. She had merely shifted her tactics. Welcoming her to live with us would be like bringing a supervisor into my home, and investing in Brittany, a girl who only knew how to enjoy herself, was an extremely risky venture I would never undertake. Michael looked at me, his eyes holding a pathetic hope that I would agree, so this meal could end in a hollow peace. He gently nudged my foot under the table, his voice soft, as he pleaded, Sophia, please help Brittany out a bit. She is my sister, after all. And Mom could stay with us for a few months for fun. I also want to be closer to her before she gets too old and weak. I put my chopsticks down, looking directly into Carol's eyes, a polite smile on my face, but absolutely no hint of concession. Mom, regarding Brittany, business decisions cannot be made based on emotion. If Brittany has a viable business plan, I'm willing to consider it as an investor, but I cannot give money unconditionally. As for you moving in, I think you and Dad are used to the spacious, quiet environment here. Our apartment is small and located in a noisy area. I'm afraid you wouldn't be comfortable. Moreover, Michael and I need time at first to adjust to our private life together. I hope you understand and sympathize with my frankness. I want our relationship to last, based on respecting each other's private space, not on imposition. Carol stood up abruptly, her face purple with rage. She didn't say another word, but walked straight into the inner room, slamming the door shut with a bang that made the entire dinner table shake. Brittany also threw her chopsticks onto the table, glared at me with contempt, and followed her mother. Michael sat there, his face showing clear disappointment and even resentment towards me. He called me a cold-hearted woman who only cared about money and dry rules, without an ounce of human warmth. The first dinner as a daughter-in-law ended in utter devastation. I silently cleared the dishes, tears falling into the sink. I questioned myself. Was my persistence in defending these boundaries right or wrong? When all it brought was solitude in my own husband's home. After that tumultuous first dinner as a daughter-in-law, the atmosphere between me and my in-laws fell into a terrifying silence. Carol no longer called to urge us to come home as before, but I knew her silence was not a surrender, but the accumulation of a bigger storm. Michael continued to come and go, his face dejected, occasionally sighing secretly when looking at our wedding photos on the wall. He seemed to be under some invisible pressure from his mother, but dared not confront me directly to share it. Until one weekend evening, just as a summer downpour had ceased, Carol unexpectedly appeared at our apartment with a completely different demeanor. She was no longer seething with anger, but instead displayed a gentleness and solicitude that made me feel uneasy. Carol sat down on the sofa, clutching my hand. Her voice trembled as if holding a profound worry. She said that she had thought a lot over the past few days. She loved her children and also worried about the Chu family's reputation, which had been damaged after the wedding incident. Sophia, I know you are capable and self-respecting. I also understand that the mansion belongs to Chloe, but outsiders don't understand. They just look at it and mock Michael, saying he's a braggart, riding on his wife's coattails and then humiliated by his wife. Carol sighed, her eyes looking at me pleadingly. I've thought of this. I have some retirement savings I've accumulated over the years, plus the gold I plan to give you two as seed money. I want us to pool our money, and you ask Chloe if she would transfer that mansion to our family. Your name and mine would be on the deed, as family property. This way, Michael can hold his head high among his friends, and Brittany and I would also have a sophisticated place to come and go. I listened to her, my heart turning cold. The joint ownership trap she proposed was truly a formidable move. She wanted to use a small portion of her retirement savings to legitimately become co-owner of a massive asset that I had worked tirelessly to help Chloe acquire, and that I myself had a stake in. If I agreed, it meant I would voluntarily surrender my hard work to my in-laws. More importantly, I would have to live my entire life with people who valued appearance more than truth. I looked at Michael, seeing his eyes light up with intense hope. He eagerly echoed his mother's words without considering the risks or financial burden I would have to bear. Sophia, Mom's idea is great. Can you try to convince Chloe? If we buy that place, we'll have a spacious home for the whole family, and it'll silence all those unpleasant rumors that have been going around. I think it's a win-win, honey. Michael's enthusiasm filled me with dread. He didn't consider where I would find tens of millions of dollars to supplement his mother's meager retirement fund. Carol continued to pour honeyed words into my ears about a harmonious family, about how she would take care of my children later, so I could focus on my career. But I knew Carol didn't care about my hardships. She only cared about how to make that mansion property of the Chu family. On paper, I silently withdrew my hand from hers. The touch felt artificial and calculating now. I knew I had to say no, but how to say it without Michael feeling insulted and without Carol having an excuse to cause chaos was an incredibly difficult problem in that suffocating room. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension rising in my chest as I faced two people waiting for a nod from me. I didn't look at Michael, but directly into Carol's sharp eyes, hidden behind her stern facade. Mom, I understand your intentions for Michael and the family, but I must respectfully say that I cannot go along with this plan, I stated, my tone clear and without hesitation. First, that mansion is a strategic asset for Chloe. She bought it for an office and long-term investment. It's not something that can be transferred just out of friendship. Second, and most importantly, I don't want to get involved in complicated financial matters with the family. Your retirement savings are for you to enjoy your golden years. I have no right, nor would I dare, to touch them, because if anything were to happen later, I would be the one bearing the greatest blame. Carol heard this, and her gentle expression vanished in a flash. She dropped her hands, her voice becoming shrill. "What do you mean by that? Are you afraid I'll trick you, or that this family will seize your money? I've humbled myself to the point of offering my retirement savings to save your reputation. And you're still calculating pros and cons, like a stranger?" Michael also jumped up, his face contorted with anger. He pointed at me and shouted, "Sophia, that's enough. Mom has compromised like this. What more do you want? Are you afraid that if you share ownership with Mom, you won't be able to kick my mother and sister out of the house later if you want? You always only think about yourself, about that damn boundary you've set up. Do you even consider this family?" Michael's shout was like a bucket of cold water thrown in my face. I looked at the man I had once trusted my life with, now siding with his mother to insult his wife with venomous words. I maintained my composure, though my heart lacked. "Michael, a family is built on respect and sincerity, not on imposition and calculations about assets. I set clear boundaries not because I don't consider you family, but because I want to protect this family from financial conflicts that could erupt at any time. If we continue to be ambiguous like this, sooner or later, our feelings will be shattered by suspicion. I will not buy that mansion, and I will not share ownership of my private assets with anyone. If Mom and you truly care for me, please let me live peacefully in this apartment." Carol said nothing more. She stood up, cast a contemptuous look at me, then silently walked straight out the door. Michael quickly followed his mother, not forgetting to give me a gaze filled with resentment. I stood in the empty room, feeling loneliness engulf me from all sides. I had won the battle of maintaining my financial boundaries, but I knew I was losing miserably in the battle for the heart of this weak-willed husband. Michael's words had left a wound too deep in my heart, a wound that perhaps even time would struggle to heal. I sat down on the cold floor, no longer able to cry, only feeling an extreme emptiness seeping into every cell. I began to doubt the so-called family happiness I had dreamed of for so long. For 3 days after that argument, Michael didn't come home. He didn't answer his phone or respond to any of my messages. The apartment, once cozy, now felt vast and eerily cold. Every step I took in the house echoed with lonely sounds. I sat in my office, but my mind was completely blank. The numbers and blueprints before me became blurry. Finally, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere any longer, I decided to meet Chloe at a familiar riverside cafe. Seeing Chloe, I felt like a child finding a rock to lean on. All the strength and resilience I had struggled to maintain for so long suddenly vanished. I buried my head in my hands. Tears I had held back for so long now flowed like a river. Chloe sat silently beside me, gently stroking my hair, letting me cry until my heart eased. "I was wrong, wasn't I, Chloe? Maybe I shouldn't have gotten married, or at least not to someone like Michael." I choked out through my sobs. Chloe sighed, her voice somber, but clear-headed. "Sophia, you're not wrong for wanting to protect yourself. The only mistake was being too forgiving and believing in the change of someone who was inherently molded in a selfish pattern from childhood. Human greed, especially from those who always invoke love to demand, is like a bottomless well. No matter how much money, how much patience you pour into it, it will never be enough." I looked up at Chloe, my eyes swollen and full of confusion. But Michael was always so gentle. How could he say such cruel things to me? He called me cold-hearted, said I valued money more than family. I just want an independent life, not dependent, and not invaded by anyone. "Why is that so difficult, Chloe?" Chloe gripped my hand tightly. "Because he wasn't brave enough to protect you from his mother, so he chose to attack you to justify his own weakness. You have to be clear-headed, Sophia. If you concede now, you'll lose everything. Not just your money, but the last bit of self-respect you have. If this marriage is to continue, Michael needs to be the one to change, not you." Chloe's words were a wake-up call, helping me confront the harsh reality I was facing. I realized that my moment of weakness was only temporary, but the boundaries I had drawn were crucial for my survival. We sat there until the sun completely set over the Los Angeles skyline. Chloe advised me to travel for a few days to regain my balance, but I knew I couldn't run forever. I had to return to that apartment, confront Michael, and make a decisive choice for the future. As I walked out of the cafe, The ocean breeze blew strongly, making me shiver. But my eyes were no longer clouded with tears. I knew what I needed to do, even if the price might be the dissolution of a marriage in which I had once placed so much hope. That afternoon, the Los Angeles sun cast long, mottled shadows on the cafe table. I sat across from Chloe, my heart heavy with unnamed thoughts. The sharp clinking of ice against the glass seemed to tear through the thick atmosphere of my sorrow. Chloe looked at me, her eyes, both sympathetic and tinged with reproach. She gently pushed a plate of pastries towards me and sighed softly. Sophia, how long are you going to hide behind this strong facade? Human greed, especially from those who take reliance for granted, will never have an end. I looked up, my eyes still a little red from earlier tears. My voice was hoarse with indignation. I just want to live decently, to honor my parents, and to have a real family. Why are such simple things so luxurious for me, Chloe? Chloe took a small sip of tea. She began to tell me about the bitter experiences she had faced in business, about siblings who would turn their backs on each other over a piece of land. She said that human hearts are sometimes more treacherous than rough seas. And the bottomless well of Carol's greed was essentially a lack of genuine love for her children. Look, she doesn't want that mansion to live comfortably, but to show off, to prove to everyone that she has a daughter-in-law who's a money-making machine. And Michael, he's gentle, but that gentleness is a complicity with his mother's wrongdoings. He's using filial duty to suffocate his wife's right to control her own life. Chloe's words were like knives cutting into reality, making me hurt, but also incredibly clear-headed. I realized that all this time I had been too forgiving, always thinking that concession would bring peace, but it turned out the more I retreated, the more they advanced. I looked down at the swirling river water, feeling the cold evening wind seep through my thin clothes, silently telling myself I needed to be even tougher. If I didn't protect myself, no one would, not even the man I called my husband. Chloe clasped my hand tightly, her voice firmer. Remember this lesson, Sophia. The human heart is the hardest to predict, especially when it's blinded by material things. You must hold on to your roots, hold on to your assets, because that is your hard work, your self-respect as a modern woman. Don't let anyone, not even your closest relatives, use the pretense of family affection to strip away your freedom. If Michael cannot be a fortress protecting you, then he is just someone walking the same road, but not in the same direction. The conversation with Chloe ended as the city began to light up. The sparkling city lights reflected on the water looked splendid, but also distant. I stood up, feeling my feet a little steadier. I understood that this moment of weakness was the most valuable lesson to prepare me for the storms ahead. I would go home, I would confront Michael, but with a completely different mindset. No longer a wife who only sacrificed silently, but a woman who knew her worth and was ready to fight to the end to protect those values. My shadow stretched long on the paved path, lonely but determined amidst the bustling city. That evening, I returned to my apartment around 10 p.m., finding Michael sitting alone in the dark living room, cigarette smoke lingering in the streetlights, filtering in from the balcony. Hearing the click of the key, he startled and turned, his face visibly tired and hollowed after just a few days apart. I didn't say anything, quietly went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water, but Michael came up from behind and hugged me tightly. His breath smelled of smoke and belated regret. Sophia, I'm sorry. I've thought a lot these past few days. I know I was wrong to say those things that hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't stand by you when Mom was being unreasonable. I stood still in his embrace. The familiar warmth of the man I loved suddenly surged. But my reason remained vigilant. I gently pulled away from him, looked straight into his eyes, and asked, "You're sorry, but will everything just go back to how it was? Will Mom still pressure me? And will you still stand by and watch me be tormented by her cruel words?" Michael shook his head vehemently, his eyes red as if he had been crying, his voice pleading pathetically. "No, Sophia, I don't want to lose you. I don't want Mom and us to keep living like this. I've talked to Mom. She's very angry, and she won't stop if we're still living close by. I've thought about this. We'll move out and rent a small condo, a bit farther from Mom's house, so we can have our own space, so you don't have to hear Mom and Brittany's unpredictable words. Moreover, I'll start over with you, just the two of us. No financial involvement with anyone else. Michael's proposal stunned me. This was the first time in all our years of dating and marriage that I saw him make a rebellious decision against Carol's imposing nature. A faint glimmer of hope ignited in my heart. Perhaps his love for me was still strong enough for him to overcome his mother's overwhelming influence. We sat together that whole night, planning a new future. Michael promised he would use his own salary to cover the rent, while my salary would be saved for later. He wanted to prove to his mother that he could be independent, and he wanted me to live true to myself, no longer forcing myself to be a traditional daughter-in-law. Hearing his heartfelt words, my heart tightened with emotion mixed with a touch of sadness. I knew he was fighting a difficult battle between his mother and his wife, and his choice now was truly a major turning point. I told myself that if he dared to step out of his comfort zone for my sake, I should also give him and this marriage one last chance. Perhaps geographical separation would be the best medicine to soothe the long-standing tensions. The next morning, both of us felt much more uplifted. Michael began searching online for rental properties. I also started packing some necessary personal items. Seeing him enthusiastically making calls, inquiring about prices and locations of apartments, I saw again the image of the passionate man I had once fallen deeply in love with. We agreed not to tell Carol immediately to avoid her interference, but to quietly prepare everything until the rental agreement was signed. Hope for a new home, a new beginning, helped me temporarily forget the wounds in my heart that were still bleeding. I smiled, a rare smile in recent days, silently praying for this plan to go smoothly, so we could find peace after exhausting days of storm. In the days that followed, during lunch breaks or after work, Michael and I would drive around the city, looking at houses. The feeling of choosing our own sanctuary with my husband was strange, both thrilling and exciting, like when we first started dating and dreamed of a bright future together. Michael was very thoughtful. He carefully checked everything from the electrical and plumbing systems, building security, to the direction of sunlight and wind, ensuring I would be as comfortable as possible. I want this house to be truly cozy, a place where every time you come home, you won't feel any more pressure or worries, he said, holding my hand tightly as we stood in a high-rise apartment with a view of a lush green park. After much consideration, we finally settled on a small but very modern and tastefully designed condo in the Marina del Rey area. Although the apartment wasn't as grand as Chloe's mansion, it gave me an immense sense of peace and security. I loved how the afternoon sun streamed through the wide window, casting golden streaks on the dark wooden floor. I also loved the cute little kitchen, where I envisioned cooking delicious meals for us without anyone's scrutiny. Michael was also very pleased with this apartment. He said the rent here was a bit higher than initially planned, but for my comfort, he was willing to work extra hours to make up for it. Seeing his effort, my heart softened, and all my suspicions and anger seemed to dissipate with the wind. I began to believe that as long as we were united, we could overcome any difficulty. We spent the entire evening discussing home decor. I wanted to buy a few green plants for the balcony, while Michael wanted a small bookshelf in the corner of the living room so we could read together every weekend. Laughter and joyful chatter filled the room again, dispelling the heavy, gloomy atmosphere of the previous days. Michael even joked that after we moved out, he would learn to cook so I wouldn't have to struggle anymore. He wanted to make up for all the hardships I had endured since joining his family. I looked at him, my heart full of hope, silently wishing this would be the happiest new chapter of my life. We planned to sign the contract this weekend and start moving immediately afterward so Carol wouldn't have time to react. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, and I had already started dreaming of peaceful dinners, just the two of us. However, deep down, I still worried about Carol's reaction when she found out her son was moving out. I understood her personality. She was controlling and always considered her son her property, so Michael moving out would certainly be a huge shock to her. I sighed softly, taking Michael's hand in mine, feeling his steady presence as a reassurance. "No matter what happens, let's not let go of each other, okay, Michael?" I whispered to myself. That night, I slept a deep sleep, free from nightmares of scolding words or my mother-in-law's sharp glares. I dreamed of Michael and me tending to small flower beds on the balcony of our new home where only love and respect reigned. Friday evening, The atmosphere in our small apartment was buzzing, as if preparing for a distant ocean voyage. Michael and I had just finished packing the last cardboard boxes, carefully taping them and labeling each item: kitchenware, clothes. According to our plan, early tomorrow morning, we would meet the landlord in Marina del Rey to officially sign the contract and get the keys. Michael smiled brightly. He wrapped his arm around my waist and told me we should go to bed early tonight to get enough rest for a tiring moving day. I looked at the neatly stacked boxes in the corner of the room, feeling freedom drawing closer than ever. The boundary I had longed for was finally about to be established by a clear geographical reality. We turned off the lights, lay beside each other, talking about the paint colors for the new bedroom, about the wooden shelf he would build for my cosmetics. But just as peace enveloped us, Michael's phone rang insistently, tearing through the quiet night. Seeing Brittany's name on the screen, my heart suddenly tightened with a bad premonition. Michael quickly answered. Just a few seconds later, his face completely changed, his eyes wide with panic, and his breathing became rapid. What? Mom? What happened to Mom? She fainted. Which hospital? Okay. I'm coming right now. I'm coming right now. Michael stammered. The phone nearly slipped from his hand as he frantically grabbed his jacket hanging on the rack. I sat up abruptly, feeling a cold rush run down my spine. Not out of worry for Carol's health, but because the timing of this fainting spell was suspiciously coincidental. Carol was a healthy, sharp woman. I had never heard her complain of any serious illness before. I silently put on my clothes and rushed out of the house with Michael. Questions kept popping into my head, but seeing my husband's distraught and extremely worried face, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Upon arriving at the hospital, the air was thick with the smell of disinfectant, and the hurried footsteps of doctors and nurses heightened the tension. We saw Brittany huddled on the hallway floor, sobbing hysterically, as if the sky were falling. Seeing Michael, Brittany rushed to embrace him, her voice choked between sobs. Michael, Mom. Mom was doing housework when she suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed. I called her name endlessly, but she wouldn't wake up, so I had to rush her to the emergency room. The doctor is examining her inside. I'm so scared, Michael. What if something happens to Mom? How will I live? Michael held his sister, his hands trembling as he comforted her, his eyes fixed on the emergency room door, filled with despair and remorse. He turned to look at me, his gaze containing a hidden reproach, as if our intention to move out was the reason his mother was lying here. I leaned against the cold wall, watching the drama unfold before my eyes, my heart heavy with suspicion, mixed with pity for my husband's weakness. I knew our plan to move tomorrow morning had dissolved into thin air. Carol had played her final card, a card named life and filial duty, to bind her son's feet. Looking at the hospital clock ticking by, I felt the packed boxes at home mocking my naivety. That night, the hospital became a silent psychological battlefield, where my freedom was once again bargained away with the tears and calculating laments of my in-laws. Saturday morning, which should have been when Michael and I joyfully signed our condo lease in Marina del Rey, now found us dozing on the hard plastic chairs of the hospital. Carol had been moved to the recovery room after doctors announced her condition was temporarily stable but required further monitoring. Michael looked several years older after a sleepless night. His stubble was messy, and his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep and anxiety. Every time I tried to ask about signing the contract, or suggested he call the landlord to reschedule, he would look at me with a resentful glare, as if I were the most insensitive person on earth. Sophia, can you please stop talking about houses? Mom is lying in there, we don't know if she'll live or die, and all you can think about is that damn condo. Michael snapped when I gently touched his shoulder to remind him of our 10 a.m. appointment. Michael's outburst drew the attention of a few people nearby, and also Brittany. My sister-in-law immediately added fuel to the fire with hurtful words. Sophia, are you even human? My mom got sick, worrying about this family, worrying about you and Michael moving out and no one taking care of her when she's frail. And you still have the mind to think about moving out to enjoy yourself. Your selfishness is too much. My brother is truly unfortunate to marry a wife like you. I fell silent, my chest tightening with indignation, but I couldn't utter a word. The truth was, I had contributed to the hospital bills, and I had rushed around handling admission procedures all night. Yet, in their eyes, I was still the culprit, simply because I didn't want to give up my freedom. Michael didn't defend me, not even once. He turned his face away. His heavy sigh echoed like an indirect condemnation of his wife. The moral pressure from my in-laws was like a 1,000-pound stone crushing my shoulders, making me feel suffocated in the thick air of illness and deceit. I looked at Michael, the man who just yesterday promised to protect me, to build our own home with me, now so easily manipulated by the tears of his mother and sister. He began to mumble about perhaps being punished by heaven for being unfilial, for intending to abandon his mother when she needed him most. He told me that the rental plan should be completely canceled. I can't go anywhere else when Mom is so weak. I'll stay here and take care of her. You can go wherever you want. Move out by yourself if you wish, but don't expect me to sign anything anymore. Michael's declaration was like a final knife thrust, severing any fragile hope I had left for his change. I walked out of the patient area, wandering around the sun-drenched hospital grounds, but my heart was utterly frozen. I realized that in this battle, I was not only fighting Carol, but also an entire system of outdated, futile thinking and a weakness deeply ingrained in my husband's very being. They used filial piety as a weapon to strip away my boundaries, using feigned weakness to force me into submission. I sat down on a stone bench under an old jacaranda tree, tears silently falling as I felt utterly alone among those who should have been my dearest family. An idea flashed in my mind. I needed to know the truth about Carol's condition. I couldn't let my life be decided by an ambiguous charade without clear evidence. After regaining my composure, I decided not to return to the patient room immediately, but to find the doctor who was on duty last night to inquire about Carol's medical records. Thanks to a few connections in the medical field, I gained discreet access to the information. When I looked at the numbers and the specialist's notes, I felt a surge of anger run down my spine. Carol had absolutely no stroke or serious heart condition. All her vital signs were normal, except for mild hypoglycemia due to skipping a meal. I even overheard the doctor privately discussing with a nurse about why all the readings were stable, yet the patient exhibited such severe pain. Holding the results in my hand, I felt like a fool who had been led around for over 10 hours, and even more painfully, by Michael's unwitting or complicit involvement in this charade. I quietly returned to the patient room, peeking through the slightly ajar door to observe. Michael had gone out to buy breakfast, leaving only Carol and Brittany in the room. Carol, who had moments ago been moaning weakly, was now sitting up, eating porridge and whispering to her daughter in a triumphant tone. "I told you, as long as I act a little bit, Michael won't dare to go anywhere. That stubborn daughter-in-law will have to shut up and see if she still dares to demand moving out or buying a house. Just let her pay the hospital bills, and I'll stay here for a few days to show her, to make her fear her mother-in-law's authority and know how to obey." Brittany chuckled, clapping her hands in approval. "You're brilliant, Mom." She looked like she was about to cry earlier. "And Michael just stuck to you like glue. This time, she has no room to maneuver. That mansion will be ours sooner or later, Mom." Those words were like direct shots at my self-esteem. The truth was laid bare, crude and ugly, to the point of making me nauseous. They were not only greedy, but they also used the sacred bond between mother and son as a tool for personal gain and to oppress others. I didn't storm into the room to expose them right then, because I knew that with Michael's weakness, he would again accuse me of slandering his mother or of being overly suspicious. I took a deep breath, recording that brief conversation on my phone as solid evidence for my final boundary. I realized that the core issue was not the mansion or the Marina del Rey condo, but that the Chu family had never regarded me as a human being deserving of respect, only as an object for them to conquer and exploit. I walked into the room with a calm expression, as if nothing had happened. Carol immediately lay down, feigning pain. Brittany hastily hid the bowl of porridge and put on a worried face. I didn't bother to glance at them. I just approached the bed, placing the medical records on the bedside table. "I've talked to the doctor, Mom. You only have mild hypoglycemia, nothing serious. Please rest. I've paid enough hospital fees for the next 3 days. I have urgent business to attend to at the office." Carol heard this and suddenly froze, her eyes revealing surprise and a hint of confusion. I turned and left, not giving them a chance to utter any more falsehoods. Stepping out of the hospital, I felt lighthearted, but also colder than ever. This charade had helped me make a decisive choice, a decision I knew would completely change my life from this moment on. I returned to the apartment as twilight had completely faded behind the tall buildings. This space, which should have been the most peaceful, now reeked of deception, and the stacked cardboard boxes mocked my own naivety. Michael arrived about an hour after me, his face still showing a feigned weariness mixed with a hidden triumph in his eyes. He walked in, ignoring the boxes, waiting to be moved, and slumped onto the sofa, letting out a loud sigh as if to remind me of the hardship he had just endured at the hospital. I quietly brewed a pot of tea. The whistling of the boiling water in the silent kitchen sounded jarring. I placed the tea tray on the table, looking directly at the husband I had once wholeheartedly trusted, my heart strangely calm after fully grasping the true nature of the situation. "Michael, we need to talk, once and for all," I began, my voice no longer trembling or indignant, but sharp and icy. "The plan to move out tomorrow morning is canceled, because I know you will never dare to step out of your mother's shadow, especially after that elaborate hypoglycemia charade." Michael flinched, looking at me with a mix of surprise and anger, about to accuse me of being heartless as usual, when I raised my phone, playing the audio and video I had recorded in the hospital room. Carol's triumphant laughter and Brittany's greedy tone resonated clearly in the confined space, making Michael's face turn from flushed red to ashen pale. His lips trembled, unable to speak. I turned off my phone and looked at him with pity. "See? The filial duty you always used to pressure me into conceding is actually just a tool for your mother and sister to exploit. They're not sick. They just want to tie your feet down and turn me into an ATM, nothing more. I've paid enough hospital fees for 3 days, considering it my final obligation as a daughter-in-law in this charade. But from this moment on, I will live my life my way. And these are 3 non-negotiable terms, if you still want to maintain this marriage with me." I saw Michael bury his head in his hands, humiliation evident in his trembling shoulders, but I no longer felt pity. My kindness had been played for a fool too many times. First, we will absolutely not live with Mom and Brittany, for any reason. This house is my personal property, and I have the right to decide who is allowed into my space. Second, my money is my money. I will not invest, lend, or pay for any unreasonable demands from your family anymore. Sharing is only for those who appreciate it, not for the greedy. Third, in all matters going forward, from dealing with family to external affairs to raising children, if we have them, you absolutely must not let your mother interfere or impose her will on our lives. If you cannot do that, we should free each other now." I finished, stood up, and walked straight into the bedroom, locking the door, leaving Michael sitting there with the naked truth and the principles that I knew he would find incredibly difficult to implement. A week after that fateful evening, the atmosphere in the house seemed to enter a period of false truce. Michael appeared more compliant. He diligently did housework and no longer mentioned inviting his mother to live with us, but I knew deep down he still harbored a simmering resentment towards me for exposing his mother. Just then, my company had an important project that required me to travel for business to Northern California for 5 days. Before I left, I gave Michael very strict instructions about taking care of the house and absolutely not bringing anyone home without my permission. He nodded, promising very sincerely, his eyes full of remorse, which somewhat eased my heart. I told myself that perhaps my decisiveness had worked, and this was an opportunity for us to find some balance after so many storms. The business trip was incredibly busy. Meetings stretched from early morning until late at night, leaving me no time to think much about family matters. However, on the 3rd day, I turned on the security camera because I still didn't completely trust Michael after the fake fainting incident at the hospital, and I froze at what was happening in my own apartment. On the screen, Carol and Brittany were leisurely carrying large and small bags, huge suitcases, into the house. They were laughing gleefully, as if it were their own home. Brittany even pranced and climbed onto my expensive sofa, putting her feet up. Carol was pointing her finger, telling Michael to rearrange the cabinet and furniture according to her wishes. Fury surged to my throat, making my whole body tremble. Michael had blatantly betrayed me the moment I left the house. He had opened the door and invited in the very trouble I had worked so hard to prevent, right into the heart of the home I cherished. I watched through the camera as Carol went into my master bedroom. She brazenly opened my closet, rummaging through my carefully hung designer clothes, then threw them aside to make space for her own brightly colored velvet and silk outfits. Brittany ran into my home office, rummaging through drawers, taking my expensive signing pens to play with, and even arbitrarily opening expensive perfume bottles and spraying them everywhere. The feeling of being invaded, of being betrayed, made me choke. This apartment was my sweat and tears, the last boundary of my self-respect. Yet Michael had so easily surrendered it to his family's greed. I didn't call Michael at that moment because I wanted to keep these images as undeniable evidence. I wanted to see how far they would go in their brazenness. That night, I lay in my hotel room, my heart aching, tears flowing freely from utter helplessness and disappointment. I realized that Michael's weakness was not a flaw that could be fixed. It was a character trait deeply ingrained in his being. He would rather betray his wife than refuse his mother. I decided to cut my business trip short, booking the earliest flight back to Los Angeles for the very next morning. I didn't tell anyone in advance because I wanted to witness firsthand the scene of their family reunion, brazenly claiming ownership in my own space. The plane landed at LAX just as dawn was breaking. I took a taxi straight home, with a heart that had completely grown cold and a mindset ready for an irreversible breakup. Standing before my apartment door, I took a deep breath to calm my racing heart, then inserted the key into the lock. The door opened to a strange, strong smell of pungent cooking and strong air fresheners permeating the space, which usually had a faint scent of my cinnamon essential oil. The living room now looked like nothing more than a chaotic storage room. My cardboard boxes were pushed into corners, replaced by plastic bins and luggage bags belonging to Carol, strewn across the floor. The pristine white shag rug I cherished was now stained with unidentified marks. I walked into the bedroom, and the sight before me almost made me faint with indignation. Carol was sound asleep on my bed, covered with the silk blanket I treasured. Michael was curled up on the armchair beside her. Hearing the noise, Michael started awake. Seeing me standing there with my luggage and a cold expression, he frantically jumped up, stammering incoherently. "Sophia, why are you back so early?" I was going to tell you. I didn't let him finish. I pointed at the strange luggage. "Tell me what?" "That mom was so sick you had to bring her here to take care of her immediately, or that you don't know why they're here." At this point, Carol also woke up. She saw me but showed no signs of embarrassment or remorse. On the contrary, she leisurely sat up, stretched, and said, "Oh, you're back? This house is so spacious, but you just leave it empty. My daughter and I are here to make it cozier, and also to look after your place. It's not like this condo is anything special." Carol's brazenness had reached its peak. But what truly shattered me was when I looked into the small drawer of my vanity, where I kept important documents and my personal diary. The drawer had been forced open. My project files were scattered across the table, and my diary lay open in Brittany's hand as she emerged from the bathroom. Brittany sneered at me. "Sophia writes such cheesy diary entries, all about bad-mouthing Mom and me. You're such a narrow-minded daughter-in-law. No wonder Michael suffers." The last straw had broken the camel's back. A person's minimal privacy had been ruthlessly trampled under the guise of family. I walked towards Brittany, snatched the diary back, then looked directly at the three people standing there with attitudes ranging from defiance to spinelessness. "Enough! All of you, get out of my house immediately!" I screamed, my voice tearing through the suffocating air in the room. "This house is mine, bought with my money, and I don't accept any invaders here. Michael, I gave you one last chance, but you chose to betray me to satisfy your family's bottomless greed. You and they are one and the same, only knowing how to enjoy the fruits of others' labor without an ounce of shame." Michael knelt, clutching my legs, pleading, but I pushed him away decisively. I felt as if I had just escaped a long nightmare where my kindness had been turned into prey for the cunning. I was no longer sad or angry. I only felt a strange tranquility seeping into my heart. I knew what I had to do to reclaim my life, starting with expelling these people from the boundaries of my peace. My shout echoed in the small room, tearing apart the deceptive and sordid atmosphere that the Chu family had meticulously fostered for so long. I stood there amidst the cluttered luggage, amidst Michael's shock and Carol's brazen face, feeling a strange power flowing through my veins. I was no longer the woman who only endured silently, no longer the daughter-in-law always afraid of displeasing elders. I was now a woman pushed to her limit, using the last vestiges of her self-respect to clear the debris from her life. Carol, after a moment of stunned surprise, suddenly jumped up. She pointed a finger at my face, her lips, dark with age and anger, trembling violently. "How dare you kick me out? Do you know who I am? I am your mother-in-law, the one who gave birth to your husband. If you kick me out, you are committing an unfilial sin, and neither heaven nor earth will forgive you." I subtly curled my lip, a smile carrying profound contempt for the outdated arguments she always used as a shield. "Miss Carol, filial duty is only for parents who genuinely love their children and maintain grace and virtue for them. As for people who use feigned illness to deceive, and use the name of family to seize assets, they don't deserve those two words. This is the apartment registered in my name. I bought it with my own hard-earned money before marrying Michael. I was kind enough to welcome you, but you yourselves shattered that kindness with your brazenness and shamelessness." I turned to look at Michael, my husband, who was kneeling pitifully at my feet. His hands still clung to the hem of my shirt, like a drowning man. "And Michael, stop playing the victim. Your weakness is the sharpest knife that pierces my heart every day. You chose your mother, you chose deception. So now, leave my life with them." I walked straight to my desk, pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared after the hospital incident, and slammed them onto the wooden table. My signature appeared decisively, without a hint of hesitation or regret for the 2 lost years of my youth. "Sign here, Michael. This is the only release for both you and me. I cannot live with a husband who has no conviction, no boundaries, and is willing to betray his wife at the first opportunity." Brittany suddenly jumped in. She snatched the papers and tore them to shreds in front of me, her voice shrill and piercing. "Don't you dare. You're so rich, you think you can just walk away. My brother sacrificed so much to marry you. Are you planning to divorce to keep all that money to yourself?" My slap landed on Brittany's face like lightning, silencing her with pain and shock. "Shut up. This house has no room for a lazy and disrespectful sister-in-law like you. If you don't get out of here in the next 10 minutes, I will call security and the police for illegal trespassing and destruction of personal property." Seeing me actually pick up my phone to call, Carol finally looked scared. She frantically told Brittany to pack their belongings, continuously cursing me with the most vicious words. Michael stood up, his face streaked with tears. He looked at me as if wanting to say something, but faced with my unwavering resolve, he only bowed his head and silently followed his mother and sister out. The apartment door slammed shut, the dry sound marking the end of a dark chapter in my life. I stood silently in the empty living room, tears finally beginning to fall, but they were tears of freedom, of the liberation I had longed for. In the days after the Chu family left, my apartment seemed to regain its inherent freshness. Although the smell of strong air fresheners and pungent cooking still lingered somewhere in the fabric, I spent the entire week cleaning, discarding all the items Carol had touched, scrubbing every corner like a ritual of cleansing my soul. Michael continuously called and texted me. He stood downstairs in the building lobby for hours every evening, pleading for a chance to meet. I knew his nature. His remorse always came late, and it often carried a pitiful facade to evoke compassion from others. Finally, to resolve everything definitively before going to court, I agreed to meet him at a secluded cafe, where the Los Angeles breeze blew strong, as if wanting to sweep away old sorrows. Michael appeared disheveled, his clothes wrinkled and his eyes dark with lack of sleep and anxiety. As soon as he sat down, he eagerly grabbed my hand, his voice trembling like a culprit awaiting sentencing. "Sophia, I know I was wrong. I truly didn't realize Mom and Brittany would be so extreme when I was away. I just thought it was a simple gesture to make Mom happy. I never expected them to invade your privacy like that. Please, give me one last chance. I promise I'll cut off all contact with them. We'll rent a place far away. Just the two of us. Okay, honey? I looked at him, no longer feeling angry, only a strange emptiness. I realized that Michael's promises were like the waves out there, dissolving the moment they hit the shore. Michael, the problem isn't whether you invited Mom over or if you rent a place far away. The problem is you yourself. You lack the courage to be a mature man, a true husband. I pulled my hand away, my voice calm but carrying the weight of truth. You always say you didn't know. You never expected. But in reality, you condone them with your silence and weakness. You love me, I believe that. But your love isn't strong enough to protect our boundaries. You'd rather see me hurt than see your mother displeased. So, on what grounds do you promise a happy future? Michael buried his head in his hands, his sobs muffled in the silent space. He said that since returning to his old house, Carol and Brittany had incessantly berated him for losing a gold mine. They pressured him to return to me and demand his rights, making him feel suffocated. I listened, feeling bitter for the man I had once chosen to be my husband. Even at his most miserable, his family still only saw him as a tool to make money. Don't you see, even now, your mother doesn't care about your happiness. She only cares about my wallet. If you come back to me, that vicious cycle will just continue, and I never want to be a victim again. I stood up, leaving the new, signed and stamped divorce papers on the table. Sign here and live your life. Learn to be a man before you want to be someone's husband. Don't look for me again, because every time I see you, I only see the deception and nightmares I've tried so hard to bury. I walked away, not looking back at the thin figure sitting motionless in the cafe. I knew I had done the right thing. His regret was real, but it was too late to mend a heart that had completely grown cold. After that final meeting with Michael, I felt as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from my chest. The divorce proceedings were quicker than I expected, because Michael no longer had the courage to contest, and his family couldn't find any logical reason to hold on to someone who held all the evidence of their wrongdoing. The day I received the court's decision, I stepped out onto the street with a light heart. The Los Angeles sun that day was unusually beautiful. Each ray danced on my shoulders as if celebrating my rebirth. I decided to treat myself to a distant trip, returning to my hometown to visit my parents. They had worried about me so much during this time, and I, busy with work and a false happy facade, had rarely visited. My parents' old house still smelled of warm wood and the faint scent of orange blossoms in the evening breeze. Seeing me return, my parents were overjoyed, but their eyes couldn't hide their sorrow at seeing their beloved daughter looking so thin. I hugged my mother, inhaling the familiar, comforting scent, feeling that this was truly where I belonged. I'm sorry for making you worry, Mom and Dad. I've gotten divorced. From now on, I'll live closer to take care of you. My father, a man of few words, just gently patted my shoulder and said that everyone makes mistakes in life. What's important is knowing how to get back up and hold on to your roots. He said money could be earned back, but peace of mind was the most valuable thing, something no amount of gold or silver could buy. I spent an entire month in my hometown, helping Mom pick vegetables in the garden every morning, and reviewing new woodworking shop blueprints, with Dad every afternoon. The peaceful atmosphere of the countryside helped heal my emotional wounds, helping me realize that I still had so much to cherish. My work at the company was still progressing well. In fact, I felt more creative, more decisive, now that I no longer had to worry about trivial family conflicts. I began expanding my business, investing in projects I had always dreamed of, and particularly, I dedicated more time to taking care of myself. I exercised, learned new languages, and participated in charity activities. My life now revolved around myself and the humanistic values I pursued, not around a man or a greedy in-law family. Chloe occasionally visited my apartment. We would sit on the balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights. My friend laughed, saying that I looked more radiant and powerful now than when I was the dutiful daughter-in-law of the Chu family. See, Sophia, freedom is the best beauty regimen for women. When you no longer have to live for the eyes of others, you shine in your own way. I smiled, thanking Chloe for always being a strong fortress by my side during the most difficult times. I realized that happiness doesn't lie in a luxurious mansion or a perfect marriage in the news, but in having the right to control my own life, to say no to things against my conscience, and to love myself completely. A year passed in the blink of an eye. The city remained bustling with people coming and going, but in my heart, there was a calm lake after major storms. I was now a successful businesswoman, respected by many not only for my talent, but also for my confident, composed demeanor. At a seminar on sustainable architectural design, I serendipitously met David, a talented architect who had just returned from abroad. David was unlike any man I had met before. He had a thoughtful demeanor, bright, intelligent eyes, and notably, a respect for women evident in every gesture and word. We started with conversations about our professions, and gradually, these turned into simple dates at small restaurants or fascinating art exhibitions. David knew about my past, but he never judged or asked questions that would trouble me. He said that every scar on a woman's heart was a powerful story chapter, and he respected me for the courage to step out of the darkness to find the light again. Sophia, happiness isn't about finding someone to lean on, but about finding someone willing to stand beside you to gaze at the world together. I respect your boundaries because I understand that's how you protect what's most precious to you. Hearing David's words, my heart felt unusually warm, a feeling of trust and peace I had never experienced in my previous marriage. David didn't make empty promises. He quietly proved his sincerity through actions, through genuine care for my parents, and unwavering support for my career. As for the Chu family, I heard that Michael, after the divorce, couldn't bear his mother and sister's oppression and had completely moved to Seattle for work. He lived quietly and remained single. Carol and Brittany, due to their greed, got involved in a shady real estate investment, ultimately losing everything and having to sell their old house to pay off debts. They now live in a cramped rental, arguing daily and regretting having lost a good daughter-in-law and sister-in-law like me. I felt no glee, nor did I feel pity. I only saw it as a fair price for what they had caused. Karma, after all, spares no one, and insatiable greed sooner or later leads people to the abyss of loneliness and destitution. This weekend, David is taking me to visit his family's home, a small house filled with light and the laughter of kind-hearted people. His parents welcomed me with sincerity, no questions about my assets or status, just simple conversations about life, about the blossoming flowers in the garden. I stood beside David, hand in hand, looking towards the horizon, where the sunset dyed the entire sky red, my heart filled with a simple yet enduring happiness. I smiled, a contented smile, because I was strong enough to let go of what was wrong, resilient enough to overcome the darkness, and forgiving enough to embrace a new, better beginning. The light at the end of the road isn't something distant, but the peace within one's soul and a sincere love based on respect and understanding. I know from now on, my life will only consist of brilliant pages, warm with human kindness. Hello, and see you all in the next videos.